Right, the other day I told you I was sat on the sofa and crying at the TV and watching Clarkson's farm. And I should tell you what actually set me off because it wasn't like one sad moment. It was the whole arc. Series 3, the piglets dying one after another, the ones crushed by their own mothers by accident because a sow's half a ton and a newborn piglet's the size of a hand. Clarkson said he'd never seen Lisa so upset. And then, after all that worry and loss, they had to sell the pigs anyway. Not because anything else went wrong, but because the pigs simply didn't make the money. That's the bit that finished me off, the heartbreak, and then the spreadsheet. And then because I'm a tax strategist and there's clearly something wrong with us, I stopped crying and thought, that's the whole story of this farm. A place like Diddley Squat keeps going through losses like that year after year, and it isn't an accident. For anyone sitting on land right now, the same thing that keeps a farm alive is the difference between passing it on and handing half of it to HMRC. Stay with us, because once you see how Diddley Squat actually makes its money and how the tax underneath it really works, you'll never watch that show the same way again. Subscribe now. The next one's Gary Lineker, £4.9 million, and a tax fight every contractor in Britain should be watching. And if this one's useful, a like before you go genuinely helps me get it in front of the people who need it. First, let me clear up the thing that confused even me. The show's about 5 years old. The farm isn't. Clarkson bought this land in 2008. For years, he didn't farm it himself at all. A contractor did. Then in 2019, the contractor retired. Jeremy took it on and pointed the camera at the chaos. The show landed on Amazon in 2021. So when you say Clarkson's farm, you're looking at a man who's owned the ground for 18 years and only properly farmed it for about 7. Diddley Squat is roughly 1,000 acres in Chipping Norton, Oxfordshire. The reported purchase price back in 2008 was around £4.5 million. He said it in his Sunday Times column, and he said he knew nothing about farming when he bought it, and the accounts pretty much agree. So here's what that ground is worth now. Savills track farmland prices every quarter, and prime arable round there runs at £9,000 to £12,000 an acre. At 1,000 acres, that's land worth somewhere between 9 and 12 million on paper. An asset that's roughly doubled since he bought it. Not because he's farmed it well, but because UK land's gone up steadily for 20 years and he happened to be standing on it. So what's he grow? Wheat, oilseed rape, a bit of barley, standard Oxfordshire rotation. The farm's run by Caleb, who, unlike his boss, actually knows what he's doing. The problem at Diddley Squat was never the farmer. Jeremy's the problem. This is a man who bought a Lamborghini tractor so big it could barely fit through the gate, then drove it into a learning curve in most of a field. Brilliant telly, terrible farming. But here's the bit nobody romanticising the countryside wants to hear. It isn't really Jeremy either. It's the economics of arable farming. The mid to large arable farm in England, on DEFRA's own figures, has made a farm business income of roughly £40,000 to £105,000 in recent years. That's in a decent year, before any diversification, and it includes subsidy. Now look at the latest forecast. Cereal farms are heading for around £17,000 for 2025 and 26, and if you strip the subsidy out completely, the core farming loses money. They're not kept alive by wheat, they're kept alive by government payments. Which brings us to the number everyone knows. Clarkson's first year of farming made a profit of £144. £144 for a year's work on a multi-million-pound asset with a Lamborghini in the shed, and he hasn't really fixed it since. 5 series in, the farming still doesn't make proper money. That's not a Clarkson joke. That's just what arable farming is. The farm's never made money from farming. What makes the money is everything around it. So let's talk about what does work, and just as importantly, what doesn't, because that's where people get burned. First, what works? The shop. The Diddley Squat farm shop opened in 2020 out of a little wooden cabin, and the queues started almost straight away. It was absolute chaos. Stock ran out, the car park overflowed, the council started circling, the range grew way past anything that came off the farm. The shop's a genuine trading business of real size. We can't see a clean turnover figure because it isn't filed that way, so I won't invent one. But the important word is trading. It earns its money from customers, not from land. Hold on to that. It matters in a minute. Then there's the beer. And this is the clever one, Hawkstone. He takes the barley grown on the farm, the same low value crop behind that £144 profit, and turns it into a branded lager. Last year, Hawkstone did £7.8 million in sales. The business has been valued at around £75 million. Good spot from Les Laws D in the comments who flagged that one for us. Now, yes, it helps enormously but that he's famous, but the principle underneath it is the most copyable thing on that whole farm. You take what your land produces and you put a brand on it. Barley sells for pennies, lager sells for £4 a pint, and the rest. And now the one that didn't work, the pub. The Farmer's Dog opened in August 2024. Famous, beautiful, fully booked every single day. And on this year's show, you find out it's losing money. Profit down about £8,500 in its first 4 months. It spends £47,000 a month just on people directing the car park. And because it's the cheapest pub in the area, you can't put the prices up to cover it. This is the bit that the daydream skips. A celebrity pub full to the doors, still bleeding cash because the cost structure is wrong. Diversifying isn't the same as making money. How you do it is everything. It's a genuine question, and I do read the replies. If you owned this, would you keep diversifying or sell up and put the money somewhere quiet? Comment diversify or comment sell. I want to see the split. Right, Clarkson's an extreme case, but the principle behind the bits that work is exactly what the quietly profitable farms in this country have been doing for 15 years. Start with the truth about subsidy. Most commercial arable farms in England have survived on government payments, not crops. The old basic payment schemes being phased out, nearly gone by 2026, and replaced with environmental schemes that pay you for looking after the land rather than growing food. The land can earn just by not being farmed. For a lot of farms, that payment's the whole difference between breaking even and not. Here's what actually generates profit on a diversified farm. The solar one's worth pausing on because the numbers are genuinely startling. A 1,000-acre farm with one good south-facing field, say 100 acres, given to ground-mounted solar on a commercial lease, can earn £85,000 to £135,000 a year, passively, for 25 years. Over the life of that lease, that's £2 to £3 million for doing nothing. No early mornings, no Caleb, and Clarkson, funnily enough, has put solar on his farm. He mentioned it in his column. He did it very quietly. The farms that are quietly rich in 2026 aren't the ones growing the best wheat. They're the ones that have diversified 10 years ago and treated the land as a platform for several income streams instead of one crop. Dalesford Organic, just up the road, turns over tens of millions. The farming's the story, the shop's the business. Now, here's what nobody mentions when they're cheerfully telling you to diversify. If you've inherited farmland or you're advising someone who has, this is the part that actually matters. There's now a cap on the inheritance tax relief for farms, and the story of that cap tells you how the whole thing works. In the 2024 budget, the government announced £1 million limit. £1 million of farm and business value gets full relief. Anything above gets taxed. Every farmer in Britain went berserk. Tractors in Westminster, the lot. And just before Christmas 2025, the government blinked and raised it. The cap that's live now from April 2026 is £2.5 million. So which is better, 1 million or 2.5? 2.5, obviously. The bigger the cap, the more of your farm passes completely free of inheritance tax. And it's £2.5 million per person, so a couple can shelter up to £5 million between them. Above the cap, the relief halves, which works out at an effective 20%, 20, not 40. Still a bill, but half the usual one. Now watch how diversifying helps. The shop and the beer business are trading businesses, so they qualify for business property relief. The land qualifies for agricultural property relief. Those are two separate reliefs. Done properly, you're not leaning on one pool of allowance, you've got two. And here's the trap. Solar and BNG can quietly blow it up. HMRC's argued in several cases that land covered in solar panels has stopped being agricultural and became an investment. If that argument wins, the land loses its APR. You've taken your most tax-efficient asset and turned it into an investment property. Biodiversity net gain land raises the same question. The case law isn't settled yet, but the way HMRC is thinking is pretty clear. So the lesson isn't don't diversify. Diversifying's right. The lesson is that badly diversifying with the income all mixed together, no proper structure, and the agricultural character of the land quietly wrecked can cost you more in inheritance tax than you ever made in solar rent. Clarkson's structure, for what it's worth, isn't an accident. He's got good advisors. The shop's a separate business, and the land's still genuinely farmed at a loss, partly because keeping it a real working farm is what keeps it qualifying for the relief. Which takes us right back to those pigs. The losses on that farm are real, and some of them are absolutely heartbreaking. But a working farm kept genuinely working is also what protects the tax relief on a £12 million asset. That's not cynical, that's just how it's built. The farms and pubs video told you what not to do. This one shows you what the version that actually works looks like and why the structure matters more than the strategy. If you've inherited farmland or you're advising someone who has, the question isn't should we diversify, it's what entity, in what order, with what tenancy, and which reliefs are we protecting? Get that wrong, and the diversifying ends up paying the inheritance tax bill instead of avoiding it. That's exactly the conversation I have with clients at apply.ctprivateoffice.com. Apply for a review. The link's in the description. We look at the whole picture. We don't take everyone, but if this made some kind of sense to you, you're probably the right person. So like this if it gave you something the show didn't. Subscribe, Gary Lineker, and follow up to David Beckham on Next. Thanks for watching.